Hi guys, welcome back. So today we're gonna make lasagna, a Taverna Lasagna, which is actually a recipe that was handed down from my grandma to my mom and then from her to me. Okay, so it's a real true family recipe, and we're selling the lasagna a lot at Taverna, and I think it's probably one of our signature dishes. Okay, so first thing we gotta do is make the tomato sauce. I have a can of crushed tomatoes. I just got that from Costco, and it's in a very rich puree, so I usually make a big batch of that because this sauce really freezes very well. We need some fresh basil, we need some garlic, we need olive oil, salt and pepper, and also some sugar. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab a few of these garlic cloves here. I want to peel quick. So this is really a recipe that you can make the day before. Lasts very well in the fridge, or you can even make it and then keep it in the freezer as well. That works too. Okay, so peel the garlic. Go, and then so because this sauce really needs to cook for at least about an hour and a half, it needs to simmer away to really get where it needs to be as far as the flavors is concerned. Okay, so therefore this is something that you gotta make first when you make a lasagna, because it takes that much time. Okay. Alright, so I'm just going to take a bigger knife and just kind of squash that garlic just a little bit, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to add olive oil into this pot here, and quite a bit actually, because that's a big can of tomatoes. Olive oil is very important for the sauce. I'm going to turn this on probably medium-high heat. Okay. And then I'm going to add in that crushed garlic. And then I'll take some of that basil and just pluck some of these basil leaves and put it right in there. Okay. It's pretty hard to find decent basil nowadays. This is actually from Taverna Farms up country. A few of those in there. Okay. Then we gotta let this get hot so that it kind of starts to fry the garlic and the basil before we put in the tomatoes. Okay, so now these are crushed, as I mentioned before, and it's a very thick puree, really. And what I do is when I put that in, I'm gonna rinse this can out with at least a third full of water to get really everything out of it, but also to dilute the tomatoes a little bit, okay? Because when we cook that for about an hour and a half, it'll reduce down to the same amount again. However, then you really intensify the flavors. Okay, let's see. Okay, so there's basically the tomato sauce that we're gonna need, and again, I'll make a big batch because you can freeze that very well. You can pack it into small containers and then freeze it individually, so you have for another couple dinners. And then we're gonna need bechamel. So we're gonna make the roux next, which is needed for the bechamel. And then we're gonna make the meat sauce a little bit later, where we need the tomato sauce. And then we'll show you how to layer the lasagna. Okay. All right. Alright, so you see this is now kind of frying up a little bit here. Get a close shot of that. And then once it's at this point, we're going to start putting in the tomatoes. It's easiest to scoop it in. And then once about halfway in there, you can start pouring, because otherwise it's going to take too long. There you go. Alright, so now I want to make sure I rinse this out very well. Like I mentioned, I usually put quite a bit of water in there. So you see this can here, about this much water, I'm going to add into this. Alright, so now we're going to put that on about medium-high heat, bring it back up to a boil, and then what we want to do is season it. Okay, season it with salt, pepper. So I got some salt, and I put quite a bit in here because it's a big pot of sauce. Okay, some black pepper. Also a little bit of sugar, because I want to make sure that we take out some of the acidity of the tomatoes. Okay, so I normally go for a quantity like this, about four spoons like that. Okay, so now we're just going to let it come back to boil, and then let it do its thing. And like I said, about an hour and a half to really get those flavors going of the tomatoes. And it really takes time. This sauce, to make that correctly, it takes time. So you can't rush it, you don't want to rush it, because that's pretty much the base of the lasagna, okay? So we'll be back a little later to show you how to make the roux. Okay, so the next step for the lasagna will be the roux. The roux is needed to thicken the bechamel. So what I have here is a pound of butter. I just melted that down. Okay, and then I'm gonna add in just all-purpose flour. So really straight into the butter. And then what you want to do is stir that in. And because it's a pound of butter, I'm going to go quite with a bit of flour here, because again, also that roux, this is something that you don't have to do every single time. You can actually do that in a bigger quantity, and then also put it in the freezer in a little plastic container. Works very well. So every time you want to make something that requires bechamel, you don't have to redo the roux. So you just take it out of the freezer and you're good to go. Okay, so once the flour is in, you're going to make sure you stir this very well so that you have no more lumps in the butter or from the flour. Okay, so because of all the fat in there, the flour will dissolve pretty nicely here. I think I'm going to have to add a little bit more because there's a whole pound of butter. So the more flour you add, the more powerful the roux gets, the less you need to thicken up the sauce. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the heat back on just for a little bit here, because you want to give this maybe a couple minutes on the heat so that it really combines well and it gets that little kind of, when you do that, you kind of get rid of the flour flavor in it. It's just about medium-high heat, and just keep stirring in it. But you see now there is no lumps in here, so it's very smooth, and that's what you're looking for. Okay. So now, as you can see here, I already started to saute the meat. This is ground beef. It's an 80-20 ratio, so it's 80% beef and 20% fat. This is actually local beef, just ground up. So what I'm gonna do, or what I did with this, is a little bit of olive oil in a sauteing pan, frying pan, put it in, put the meat in, give it nice color, and then season it with salt and pepper. So we're gonna do that right now. So the ratio 80-20 is good because it's 20% fat, 80% beef. Okay, so you want to have those flavors in there. The fat obviously gives a lot of flavor. And then you have a little bit of juice in here as well, which is good. That's what you're looking for. And then at times you gotta take a wooden spatula here and kind of break up the little pieces so that it gets somewhat broken apart this way. Okay. All right. So once this is done, I want to put this straight into the tomato sauce here, which we made earlier. Okay, I'm gonna go straight in here with the meat. And this was probably about 2.5 pounds of meat. Okay, and put it in here. Gives a good stir. So there is the meat sauce for the lasagna. Okay, so as you can see, this is fairly, I wouldn't say liquid, but it's good consistency. So we want to bring this back to a boil a little bit. So I have it on medium-low heat. In the meantime, I started the milk over here, which is for the bechamel. Okay, and this is the roux. So as you can see, the roux is cold now. So the rule really is that the milk or the roux has to be cold or hot. I prefer the milk to be hot because the roux cold, and the reason for that is so when you put that in, you don't have to stir too long if the milk is already boiling. Okay, so we're getting pretty close here. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. And before I put the roux in, I'm going to season this as well with a little salt and pepper. There you go. And a little bit of nutmeg. You can either take the whole nuts and grind it into it, or take the ground one. Just give it a couple shakes. Okay. Nutmeg is pretty strong in flavor, so you want to be careful not to put too much. And as you know, with when you have milk on the stove, you always got to be right there, because if it boils up, it really comes up very, very fast. Okay. So the roux. Since the roux is cold, and you see the consistency now, so I put this in another container, the rest of it, and you can put that in the freezer. That will hold up very, very well for your next, when you decide to make the next lasagna, or you may need it for mac and cheese or anything like that. Okay, so while this is coming up to a boil, we want to make sure we wait until it really comes up to a boil before we put in the roux. Okay. And I'm already preheating the oven at 380 degrees, 385 on bake, so that we can put the lasagna in once it's assembled. You want to use a whisk for that. That's the easiest way to make sure that everything gets really nicely dissolved. So I'm going to start to put in the roux. And so when you make the bechamel, the the amount of roux you put in will make the sauce thicker or thinner, whichever way you prefer. But what you got to be careful with is when you put it in, the milk really has to come to a boil before it starts to thicken up, so that the flour is activating the thickening of the sauce. Okay, we're pretty close to a boil here, starting right now, so we should see that sauce getting a little thicker in a minute here. Yeah, Lynn, come closer a little bit so they can see what's happening in here. So when you put the roux in, you want to make sure that you keep stirring with a whisk and make sure you stay on the bottom of the pan so it won't get burned. Just keep stirring. You see how it gets thick now? Starts to thicken up. I think we need to put a little bit more. There you go. I think we're getting very close to what we are looking for as far as the thickness is concerned. Yes, look at this. So you can see the sauce is now nice and thick, with no lumps in it, and that's what you're looking for. That's why either the milk needs to be hot, which I prefer, and the roux cold, or the other way around. The other way around, what happens is that you need to stand here for much longer and stir to make it become this way. Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn down the fire on low. Actually, just let it simmer for a little bit. And I think we're just about ready to go here. Okay, push this aside a little bit. Good. So, in the meantime, our meat sauce has gotten to a boil here. So what I want to do here is just I want to check for salt and pepper, whether we need to adjust it a little bit. Maybe a little bit more pepper. Just a twist more salt. Don't forget, we're going to add cheese as well when we assemble the lasagna, so the cheese itself has obviously also some salt and flavors in it. So we want to be careful with that. Okay. All right. So I think the next step will be assembling of the lasagna, and I will show you in a minute how that is done. Okay, so now we're gonna assemble this lasagna here. So what we're gonna have is shredded mozzarella cheese. It's a low moisture mozzarella cheese. We got the bechamel right here. We have the meat sauce, and we also have some Parmesan cheese. Okay, so what I'm using as far as the pasta is concerned, unless you want to make it fresh, you can certainly do that as well. But I'm using the oven-ready lasagna sheets. They don't need to be boiled or pre-blanched, which is great, so you can just put them in there. So if you use those, however, you want to make sure that your sauce is not too thick, because those pasta sheets will absorb a lot of that liquid in the sauce, which therefore you need the sauce to be a little bit more liquid versus thicker. Okay, so to assemble it, I'm going to start with a little bit meat sauce in here. Spread it out, and as you see, I'm using those aluminum trays right here that you can buy in Costco. They're easy, works very well. And then you put a little bit of bechamel in there, just like so. And then we're going to start to put those pasta sheets, okay? And in this tray, really, you can put about 3, 2.5 per layer. You can also break them up a little bit, that's perfectly fine. And then we repeat that step. We're going to go with meat sauce. Spread it out. And then bechamel. You just want to make sure that you have the sauces spread out nicely on those pasta sheets. And then we're going to do the mozzarella cheese. Again, make sure you have mozzarella everywhere. And then we're going to go with a little bit of Parmesan. Same thing, we're going to make sure you spread that out nicely. And then you repeat that with pasta sheets. So I'm going to start laying that down this way. And then we go with meat sauce again. And even though it kind of looks pretty liquidy right now, this is all going to be absorbed by the pasta sheets once the lasagna is done. Bechamel. And the good thing about this really is you can prepare this the day before you use it. You can keep it overnight in the fridge, or it's also very well, it holds up very well even if you put it in the freezer. So if you want to do it a couple days in advance, put it in the freezer. And then if you do that, make sure you take it out and defrost it overnight in the refrigerator. Mozzarella cheese again here. Parmesan. And then we go with the next layer. Pasta. Like this. And we'll repeat sauce. Bechamel. Cheese. And we're starting to come up to the top of the mold here, of the baking mold. So we want to make sure that the last layer will be pasta. And then just a little bit of everything else on top, because it's always nice to have a nice crispy crust on top once the lasagna comes out of the oven. Okay, so we go with another 3 sheets. Okay, just like that. A little bit more meat sauce. Bechamel. And we'll finish it off with a little bit more mozzarella. So you can make as many layers as you want, depending on the size of your baking pan. Okay, and just finish it off with a little bit more mozzarella here and a little bit more Parmesan cheese. Okay, so right now this is ready to be put in the oven. I have the oven preheated at about 380, 390. My oven here is a little bit an older one, so temperature is probably not that accurate. But This is a little warm still because we just made the sauces, so this is probably going to take about 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, so we'll show it to you once it comes out of the oven. Okay, so I think the lasagna is ready. You can see here, looks pretty good. I'll take it out. And there you go. So that was about 45 minutes to an hour because all the ingredients when we assembled it were pretty much hot. So if you take it out of the fridge, then it probably takes an hour and a half. And if you freeze it and then take it out, so take it out the day before, defrost it in the fridge, and then it's probably, like I said, about an hour and a half or so at 380, and that should do the trick. Okay, so this is our lasagna, and if you like wine, you should come and try that at Taverna with our house wine, which is a Pinot Noir from Costa de Oro, made by Gary Burke, who made this label for us. Excellent wine, excellent lasagna. Enjoy, and I hope to see you soon. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.